Have you ever pondered the true significance of the 10 plagues mentioned in the Bible? They're not just a narrative of Yahweh's wrath poured out on Egypt, but a rich tapestry of symbolic messages and divine revelations. Today, we're about to embark on an expedition into the depths of these biblical events, peeling back the layers of their historical context and unearthing their profound implications for us in the present day. The 10 plagues, as depicted in the book of Exodus, were a series of divine interventions designed to demonstrate Yahweh's supreme power and judgment. The land of Egypt was struck with a series of calamities, each more devastating than the last, as the Pharaoh's heart remained hardened against the pleas for freedom by the Israelites. But what lies behind these cataclysmic events? Are they merely historical accounts, or do they bear symbolic meanings that transcend time and space? Each plague, in its own way, served to dismantle the Egyptian pantheon, systematically disproving the power of each Egyptian deity and firmly establishing the sovereignty of Yahweh. Our journey begins with an examination of each plague in its own right, from the Nile turning into blood to the death of the firstborn of Egypt. We're not just recounting the biblical narrative, but delving into the symbolic connotations, the historical context, and the theological implications that each plague carries. What can we, as modern-day believers, glean from these events that occurred thousands of years ago? Are there messages encoded within these plagues that resonate with our lives today? Are we to draw parallels between the plagues of Egypt and the challenges that face us in our current world? This is not a mere historical or theological exploration, but a quest for understanding, a search for meaning, and a journey of faith. We're not just looking at the 10 plagues as isolated events in the past, but as a part of a divine narrative that continues to unfold, with lessons and warnings that are as relevant today as they were in the times of Moses. Embark on this journey of unraveling the mysteries behind these divine events. The first plague, the transformation of the Nile into blood, a sight that must have been terrifying. Picture the life-giving Nile, the backbone of Egyptian society, suddenly turning into a river of blood. This was not just a gruesome spectacle, but also a profound disruption of life in Egypt. The Nile was the heartbeat of Egyptian civilization, providing water for drinking, irrigation, and even transportation. Now, imagine the horror and chaos as this crucial resource transformed into a deadly, undrinkable stream. The fish died, the river stank, and the Egyptians could not drink its water. This first plague marked the commencement of Yahweh's judgment on Egypt. It was significant not only for its immediate tangible impact, but also for its symbolic meaning. It was a direct challenge to the Egyptian god of the Nile, Hapi, asserting the superiority of Yahweh. This plague demonstrated the superior power of Yahweh over the Egyptian god of the Nile, Hapi. Following the bloodied Nile came the second plague, an overwhelming invasion of frogs. Imagine, if you will, the sheer scale of this event. Frogs, in their thousands, maybe even millions, covering every inch of the land. The croaking would have been deafening, the sight unimaginable. But let's delve a little deeper. This plague was more than just an annoyance, it was a symbolic act, a divine commentary on the power dynamics of the time. You see, in ancient Egypt, frogs were associated with Heket, the goddess of fertility and childbirth, often depicted as a frog. The Egyptians revered her, believed in her power. But the second plague, this biblical deluge of frogs, it challenged that belief. It was Yahweh saying, "Your goddess cannot control her own symbol, I can." This was not just an invasion of frogs. It was an invasion of faith, of belief systems, a divine disruption of the status quo. This plague was a direct affront to Heket, further demonstrating Yahweh's supremacy. From the frogs we move to the third plague, the transformation of dust into lice, a humbling and horrifying experience. This plague struck at the very heart of Egypt, turning the common dust of the earth into a source of torment. Imagine every speck of dust in your home, your city, your country, transforming into lice. The discomfort, the disruption, the sheer horror of it all, it's almost unfathomable. This plague wasn't just about discomfort, though. It was a direct challenge to the Egyptian god of the earth, Geb. The transformation of dust into lice was a powerful demonstration of Yahweh's supremacy over all gods, even those that govern the very earth we walk on. This act wasn't merely an affliction, it was a divine statement, a declaration of power and control over every tiny particle in the universe. The lice served as a tangible sign of Yahweh's power over even the smallest elements of creation. The fourth plague brought the buzzing nuisance of swarms of flies. A seemingly insignificant creature, yet in vast numbers they transformed into a force of disruption, causing discomfort and chaos. This plague, unlike the previous ones, was not just a physical torture but also a psychological torment, as the constant buzzing and the relentless swarming of flies were enough to drive anyone to the brink of insanity. But there's more to this plague than meets the eye. This was a direct affront to Khepri, the Egyptian god of creation, rebirth, and the sun, often symbolized by a fly. It was a clear message that the God of the Hebrews had power over all life, a direct challenge to Khepri's authority. In the grand scheme of things, the swarms of flies served as a potent reminder of Yahweh's supreme power, a power that transcends the mortal realm and even the deities of Egypt. This plague indicated Yahweh's power over life and death, undermining Khepri's perceived authority. The fifth plague struck at the heart of Egypt's economy, the death of livestock. This was more than a mere inconvenience. It was a crippling blow to an agrarian society reliant on these creatures for food, work, and religious rituals. Horses, donkeys, camels, cattle, and sheep fell under the deadly grasp of this plague. The animals' demise was not just a physical loss, but a spiritual one. They were integral to the religious practices of the Egyptians, often sacrificed to the gods or seen as incarnations of them. Significantly, this plague directly challenged the Egyptian goddess Hathor, often depicted as a cow and revered as a deity of love, joy, and motherhood. The death of livestock was a stark rebuke to Hathor's supposed power, underscoring that the true divine power was not in her, but in Yahweh. In essence, this plague served as a stark reminder of the limitations of earthly wealth and the futility of false gods. This plague was a direct attack on Egypt's wealth and the goddess Hathor. The sixth plague brought physical affliction on the Egyptians, painful boils and sores. It was a dire display of Yahweh's power, a tormenting malady that spread amongst the Egyptians, sparing no one, not even Pharaoh's household. This was no ordinary ailment. These were painful and severe, a tangible sign of Yahweh's wrath. Symbolically, the boils and sores represented a deep corruption, a sign that the physical suffering of the Egyptians was a reflection of their spiritual maladies. They had turned their backs on the true God, and in doing so they had invited upon themselves a plague that mirrored their spiritual decay. This plague was also a direct challenge to Sekhmet, the Egyptian goddess of healing. She was revered for her ability to cure diseases, but now she was powerless. No remedy could relieve the Egyptians from their suffering. This plague demonstrated that Yahweh could inflict and heal disease, undermining Sekhmet's influence. The seventh plague combined elements of earth and sky, hail and fire. This fusion of the terrestrial and celestial was a powerful display of Yahweh's authority. Hailstones, cold and unyielding, rained down upon Egypt, mingling with fire that ran along the ground, turning the landscape into a spectacle of destruction and awe. This plague was not just a demonstration of raw power, but also a strategic move in the cosmic chess game between Yahweh and the Egyptian pantheon. It was a direct challenge to Nut, the Egyptian sky goddess. Nut, who was believed to control the heavens, was rendered powerless as the sky turned against the Egyptians, raining down fire and ice. The seventh plague, a symphony of hail and fire, was a stark reminder of Yahweh's dominion over all things, whether they be of the earth or the sky. It was a testament to his unfathomable power and a declaration of his superiority. This plague demonstrated Yahweh's dominion over the heavens, directly challenging Nut. The eighth plague brought a devouring force, locusts. Imagine the skies darkened not by clouds, but by a swarm of these ravenous insects, descending upon every field and orchard, leaving nothing but bareness in their wake. A stark contrast to the fertile lands of Egypt, don't you think? This eighth plague strikes at the heart of the Egyptian deity Osiris, the god of vegetation and fertility. It's not just about the locusts consuming every green thing, it's a direct challenge to Osiris's power and dominion. The locusts, under Yahweh's command, ate everything, leaving not a green thing behind. A symbolic representation of Yahweh's superior power over Osiris, wouldn't you agree? Locusts, in this context, are not just a physical plague, but serve as a symbol of destruction and desolation. They embody the power of Yahweh to strip away the blessings of the earth, demonstrating his ultimate control over the earth's produce. This plague demonstrated Yahweh's control over the earth's produce, undermining Osiris. The ninth plague plunged Egypt into darkness, a direct challenge to the sun god Ra. This wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a stark and terrifying display of Yahweh's power. Darkness, in the ancient world, was synonymous with chaos and disorder. It was the antithesis of creation, a return to the void that existed before the world was formed. This plague was a spiritual showdown of epic proportions. The sun, Ra's domain, was the source of life, growth, and prosperity in Egypt. By blotting out the sun, Yahweh was asserting his supremacy over the highest of Egyptian deities, demonstrating his power to control even the forces that the Egyptians held most sacred. In essence, Yahweh was dismantling the Egyptian pantheon one deity at a time, proving that he alone was the one true God. The darkness served as a tangible, frightening reminder of the chaos and disorder that ensues when false gods are trusted. This plague demonstrated that Yahweh could control even the sun, the source of Egypt's life and prosperity. The final and most devastating plague, the death of the firstborn. A chilling silence falls as we delve into the 10th plague. This was not merely another hardship. It was a cataclysmic event that shook the very foundation of Egyptian society and belief. The firstborn held a unique and revered position in Egyptian culture. They were the torchbearers, the continuity of the family lineage, and a symbol of future prosperity. Hence, their loss was not just personal, it was societal, even cosmic. This plague was a direct challenge to Pharaoh, who was considered a deity in his own right, the living incarnation of the god Horus. The death of his own son, the future Pharaoh, was a crushing blow, a direct affront to his divine authority and a clear demonstration of Yahweh's superior power. Additionally, the Egyptians had a strong belief in the afterlife. They built grand pyramids and crafted intricate burial rituals to ensure a peaceful journey to the afterlife. The sudden and widespread death of the firstborn, with no chance for proper rituals, would have been viewed as a catastrophic disruption of the natural order, threatening their eternal peace. The scale of this plague was immense, encompassing all of Egypt, from the royal palace to the humblest dwelling. Even the livestock were not spared. This was a clear message from Yahweh. No one was beyond his reach, and his judgment was absolute. The severity of this plague also served a divine purpose. It was the catalyst that finally broke Pharaoh's stubborn resistance, leading to the liberation of the Israelites from centuries of bondage. This event was not just a historical incident, it was a profound spiritual message. It underlined the supremacy of Yahweh, his authority over life and death, and his unwavering commitment to justice. It reminded everyone that earthly powers, no matter how grand, cannot stand against divine will. This plague was the ultimate demonstration of Yahweh's power and judgment, leading to the liberation of the Israelites. We have traversed through the biblical account of the 10 plagues, unveiling their profound significance. From the Nile turning to blood, signifying the life-giving river's transformation into a symbol of death, to the invasion of frogs, disrupting the natural order, each plague carried a symbolic message and marked the judgment of Yahweh. We journeyed further, witnessing the dust becoming lice, the swarms of flies, the death of livestock, and the infliction of boils and sores, each plague escalating in intensity. We saw how these events were not random acts, but deliberate demonstrations of Yahweh's power, a divine chess game, where each move was purposeful, calculated, and precise. Then came the hail and fire, a dramatic display of divine wrath, followed by the invasion of locusts, turning the land barren. The 9th plague, total darkness was not just a physical state, but a metaphorical representation of spiritual blindness, an embodiment of life without divine illumination. Lastly, we delved into the most devastating of all the plagues, the death of the firstborn, a heart-wrenching event demonstrating not only the judgment but also the deliverance of Yahweh. It's here we see the power of faith and obedience, as those who followed the divine instruction were spared from the wrath. These 10 plagues, while historical events of ancient times, hold relevance for modern-day believers. They serve as reminders of Yahweh's power, His judgment, but most importantly, His deliverance. They remind us of the consequences of hard-heartedness and disobedience, and of the liberation that faith and obedience can bring. They encourage us to seek divine guidance, to trust in Yahweh's plan, and to remain steadfast in our faith, even in the face of adversity. The 10 plagues are not just tales from the past, but timeless lessons, reverberating through the ages, calling us to reflect, learn, and grow. As we conclude this journey, remember that the 10 plagues serve as timeless reminders of Yahweh's sovereignty, judgment, and deliverance.